Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Legal Talk. I am your host, John Mitchell, and we are here in the Now Media Network. Very happy, very pleased, overjoyed, in fact, to have everybody with us on the show today. If you're out there in the audience, why don't you go ahead and shoot me an email? Let me know, give me a call, let me know that you watched the show, let me know you enjoyed the show. Feel free to send in your questions, because if you have questions, I've got answers. And here is a question that I have been asked many times, and I just got asked this a couple of days ago, and so I thought I'd talk about it today on the show, let everybody hear the skinny on what's going down with the IRS and tax extensions. Now, as I record this here today, it is early in April 2024, and it's people are starting to sweat, right? People are starting to feel that pressure coming on, because the tax filing deadline here in the U.S. Land of the free, we're ready to have our tax filing deadline coming up April 15th. And so people are asking me, John, oh my God, what do I do? The company didn't send me my form on time. I don't have all my information. I'm just not ready. So what do I do, John? What do I do if I need to file my taxes? Deadline's coming up. I'm not ready to file yet. What do I do about that? And boy, oh boy, strap yourselves in, because I got some good, actionable information for you here today. We're going to talk all about tax filing extensions and what it is you need to do if you are not quite ready to file your taxes yet. So diving right in, right? Okay, so we all know that the default deadline for filing our taxes here in the U.S., personal income tax returns we're talking about, is 3 months and 15 days, 3.5 months after the close of the year. So count from December 31st, 3 months, and then 15 days. So we all know tax day. Everybody knows tax day, April 15th, right? So what do you do if you're not ready when April 15th rolls around? Well, the IRS has provisions in place that you can get an extension. Now, some people don't even need, here's the thing that a lot of people don't know. Some people don't even need to file an extension to get their taxes in on time if they're not ready by April 15th. And here's an example of that. If you are a permanent resident of the United States, lawful permanent resident, LPR they call it, you got a green card, or you're a U.S. citizen, but you live overseas. Okay, so let's say you're a U.S. citizen. I myself, U.S. citizen, lived overseas. I lived in Mexico for 14 years. So let's say that you live overseas. Did you know, and a lot of people don't, but did you know that if you're living overseas at the time that the April 15th tax deadline comes about, you're overseas, not on a vacation. We're not talking about going to Cancun or something, but if you are living overseas and the April 15th deadline rolls around, you can have an automatic extension applied to you. You don't even need to file anything. You don't need to tell the IRS. You'll make a notation on your tax return when you file it. But long story short of it is, you get 2 months automatic extension just because you're living outside the United States whenever the tax deadline came around. So that's one way that you get an extension. Another way that you can get an automatic extension, let's say you're in the military, you're serving our great country and you're out there in the military, you're in a combat zone, right? You got sent off to Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever the combat zones are these days. Well, if you're out of the country and you're on deployment, you're in a combat zone, that is a 6-month automatic extension for you. So instead of April 15th, you are now due on October 15th, and you don't need to file any special paperwork. You're going to make a notation on your tax return when you do file it, but that's about it, right? You have to tell them when you file, but other than that, 6-month extension automatic. You did not have to ask for it up front. Okay, so that's first of all. So that's a couple of ways that you get an automatic extension, and There's really one more way that I can talk about that you can get an automatic extension. That is if you are in a FEMA declared disaster area. Now that can be a county, or it might be your whole state, or it might even be the entire United States, depending on when a disaster is declared. And that will show up in the Internal Revenue Bulletin. I just saw the other day, this is 2024 as I record this, and we're filing 23 returns. And I just saw the other day, somehow they picked the date August 7th. Okay, so if you're in the wildfires in Hawaii, I'm sorry, this year, I'm used to the wildfires being in California, but it's Hawaii this year. So if you're in those wildfires out in Hawaii, you have automatically, don't need to do a thing. You get an extension and you don't have to file your tax return until August the 7th. Okay. So that's three different ways that you automatically get an extension to file your tax return. Don't need to, fill out any paperwork, send it in, nothing like that. So combat zone, living overseas, or if you're in a disaster area. Okay, so that's three ways. Now, if you don't fit in any of those three, I should say, situations, and then you might still need to do a tax return, and you just don't have all the paperwork, you're not ready. Who knows? I mean, there's thousands of reasons why you might not be ready on time. Most of the time, it's because somebody that was supposed to give you a form did not give it to you on time, and so now you are just not ready. You don't have all the information you need to file your extension or file your return. So you get an extension. So the way that you file for an extension, you fill out the extension form, and you don't have to give your reason or anything. Fill out the form, put your name, address, social, and then very important, and we'll talk about this more in just a couple of minutes, but very important, you have to estimate. You have to figure out more or less your best guess, your best estimate, what kind of tax liability you're going to have due, right? You think, when you do get your information together, you think you might owe $1,000, okay? So you need to file that extension and send in the money by April 15th if you don't want to incur any interest and penalties. So very important, to do that because, as I say many times, an extension to file your tax return is not an extension to pay. A lot of people get that confused, man. So don't get that confused. Your payment deadline is still April 15th. Now, when you file that automatic extension, that extends you out. You used to be a two-step process. Now, you'd file for an extension, they'd give you 4 months, and then you file again, they give you another 2 months. Now it's just an automatic 6-month extension, and the form literally says that application for automatic 6-month extension, right? So if your taxes are due on April 15th and you file for the extension, that's 6 months, so count 6 months out, boom, October 15th, that's your new deadline, right? Now, again, when you're filing this extension, you need to be sure that you make an estimate of how much tax you're going to have due, and you need to make sure that you pay that, before April 15th. Again, it's going to get rid of, make sure you don't have any interest or penalties, and that's going to take care of you, square you away. Now, there is a provision in the rules that if you had reason to believe that you owed money and you just put a 0 down on the extension form, IRS can call that not a valid extension. They can go back and take that extension away and say that you owe taxes and interest and penalties back to the original due date, right? So they can invalidate that extension if you don't pay anything. Now, if you file an extension and you really didn't owe anything, that's fine, right? So they're not going to penalize you for that. But if you think that you're going to owe something, whip out your crystal ball, your Ouija board, whatever it is, maybe your calculator, abacus, whatever you do, figure out what kind of a tax liability you might be facing and go ahead and get that money sent in by April 15th. Now, you can file the extension anytime on or before April 15th. So you can file that, on March 17th if you want. You can file it, heck, you could file it on, January 20th if you wanted, right? If you know you're going to need extra time, go ahead and get that extension filed. And, a lot of tax professionals will actually automatically file an extension for every one of their clients. Now, you can do that and it's not really a big deal. I've seen it done many times, and nothing bad really happens. I don't think that that's really best practice, but some tax pros do that for their clients, just automatically make an extension request, right? So you can file the extension anytime up to and before up to April 15th, which would be your original deadline, right? Now, if you now don't come back and file that extension on April the 16th, because guess what? If you didn't get the extension in by the filing deadline, now that's not a valid extension. If you try to do that electronically, it will just give you a reject code and it will not even go through. So you're not going to get your extension filed if you're filing it late, right? Now, if you're filing by mail, IRS has what they call the mailbox rule. So that means that if you if you put the extension form, in this case, let's give this example, you put the extension form in the mail before midnight on April 15th, be sure you have the envelope is postmarked, and be sure that you have proof of mailing, which would be ideally you'd want one of those little green certified mail slips from the post office. You fill that out, you get them to stamp it. Now you've got proof that you mailed it, and as long as you mailed it by April 15th, on or before April 15th, you're good to go, and the IRS is going to honor that extension for you. And also, I guess one other thing I could throw in here, not only individuals can get extensions, businesses can get extensions, and the basic same rules apply. Have to do the extension before the deadline, and you have to pay whatever you think might be the taxes due before the deadline in order to not accrue interest and penalties. So that is it, folks. That's the skinny on extensions for tax time. If you're coming up on, you're starting to sweat a little bit, you're starting to feel that knot in your stomach, you start to feel like, oh my goodness, I'm not going to be ready. Never fear, don't worry. You can get an extension. IRS will automatically approve that extension for you, and this is the way it's done, and that's the requirements for getting it done. So again, thank you very much, everybody, for being with us today on Legal Talk. I am your host, John Mitchell. My telephone number in Houston, Texas is 713-333-0555. And my email address, jmitchell@cctaxlaw.com. I welcome folks letting me know they saw the show. I welcome folks to send me questions. If your question makes it to me, I might shoot you a quick email, or we might make a segment out of it and do like I did with these extensions and talk about it on the air. So thanks, everybody, for being with me, and we will be back after some commercial breaks. Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Legal Talk. I am your host, John Mitchell. We are here on the Now Media Network, and boy, oh boy, am I excited today. I'm overflowing with joy, as we might say, because today I have superstar immigration attorney Ingrid Pérez. Ingrid, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being with us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. It's our pleasure, man. I know you're going to have a lot of excellent, great information for the audience out there, and let's dive right in. So, the inquiring minds want to know, right? I've got a bit of curiosity here. Hopefully, you can clear this up for us. Okay, so talking about visas, right? Somebody wants to, they're an entrepreneur, they got that entrepreneurial spirit burning within them. They want to come to the United States, live that American dream. All right. And so, what kind of options, what might be a specific visa option for entrepreneurs that want to come permanently? They want to be a permanent resident in the United States. What kind of options do they have?
Sure, there are several options, and I can discuss them briefly. So the first option would be a visa called EB1A for extraordinary ability. This is the first preference category of this visa based on employment, and it's available for entrepreneurs who've reached an international level of success, for people who have extraordinary ability in business. So that's option number one. Option number two would be a visa called the EB2 National Interest Waiver. These are for people who are self-sponsoring, so entrepreneurs could self-sponsor for this green card, and they can come to the United States through their enterprise if their work is in the national interest. So for example, they are going to be creating jobs, creating significant economic movement, or working in an area that is of specific interest to the United States. And the final option would be a visa called the EB5, which is one where if you have the money, you can get it. For an entrepreneur who's willing to invest $900,000 or $1.8 million in a business enterprise, they are able to get permanent residency through that visa.
Okay, so that's three good options that people out there might want to be taking a look at, and that's very great information. Now, let me dive in a little bit more. Let's drill deeper and find out about that EB1A visa, internationally recognized. It comes to mind, right? A guy like maybe Elon Musk, right? So if I know he's from South Africa originally, but he's in the U.S. now. But let's say a guy like Elon, right? Is that kind of what we're talking about? Internationally recognized business people?
A guy like Elon could definitely get an EB1A. Obviously, not everybody is like Elon, but they've reached a certain level of recognition internationally that they could qualify for an EB1A. However, the EB1A is really difficult to meet the eligibility criteria. Immigration is very strict. So it does naturally exclude a lot of people in this category.
When you said the word, it stuck out to me, right? As an attorney myself, I listen for these key words and phrases, right? And so you said the word self-sponsor. What kind of what does that mean?
So typically, to immigrate to the United States through employment, you need a sponsor. So that is an employer who's offering you a full-time job in the United States, and who is willing to go through a very lengthy process called a labor certification. The whole idea is to make sure that this new person coming into the United States is not going to exclude US workers. So the law requires a company, an employer, to go through this very lengthy process to make sure American workers are not excluded. And that process is difficult, expensive. Not everybody has a US employer who's willing to do that for them. So options like the EB1A or the EB2 NIW allows you to self-sponsor, meaning you don't need a job offer, you don't need an employer. You are immigrating to the United States through employment based purely on merit. So whether it is through your extraordinary achievements through an EB1, or because through an EB2 national interest waiver, you are coming to work in the United States in an area that is of national interest.
Ah, interesting. Okay, so you don't need a sponsor because basically you are the sponsor, right? So that's
Exactly.
good. That's good information. Now,
Exactly.
I'd also, it stands out to me that you mentioned the 900,000 and the 1.8 million dollars. What's the difference between those two numbers? How would one fit into one category versus the other?
Sure. So for the EB5 program, for the EB5 visa, there are two types of investments. The first one is a minimum or $900,000 investment that you make in something called a regional center. A regional center is sort of like an entity that pulls together investors' capital contributions to this big investment pool. And from that, you're able to get a visa through the EB5. So it's a designated regional center, maybe like a big hotel or a theme park that takes outside investors' funds to invest the project, right? And through that, a person can get an EB5. If that's not an attractive option for an entrepreneur and they want to invest in the United States through their own business, they need to spend at least $1.8 million. Obviously, there are other requirements too, like job creation, all of that. You have to show that your funds are coming from legitimate sources. So it's a lot more complicated than that. But the minimum barrier to entry is that $1.8 million that the entrepreneur is going to be investing directly in their enterprise.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Oh man, this is so good. This is such good information. I'm so happy and pleased to have you with us and have you sharing that great information out there. Now, this brings up a question in my mind, right? Like, let's say if I were a foreign guy and I want to come live that American dream, and I'm looking at I want to come to America, right? I'm looking at these options. Now, I'm not as smart or as handsome as Elon, and I don't have, $1.8 million. So what might be the best kind of option for me in that kind of circumstance?
Maybe an EB-2 national interest waiver. We immigration attorneys call it EB-2 and IW. You speak to any immigration attorney, they'll know what an EB-2 and IW is. The EB-2 and IW is great for entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs cannot self-sponsor, right? So it is one way that an entrepreneur can come to the United States. However, the endeavor or the proposed work that the entrepreneur is coming to do has to be in the national interest. And that is there's a very clear definition, right? So national interest means you're coming to work in an area that is of strategic importance to the United States. And I can give you some examples. I've worked with entrepreneurs who worked with engineering, right? They are engineers by trade and they have an engineering company and they're coming to the United States to set up an engineering consultancy firm to offer services to maybe a construction company or the government or other areas within their engineering profession. I've done entrepreneur EB2 and IWs, for example, for a person with a food fabrication company in their home country, and they were coming to the United States to bring their product over. And this person specifically was working with gluten-free products that were organic, ethically sourced. And the argument for the national interest of that endeavor was that Americans have gluten intolerance. We need more gluten-free options. So things like that, right? I did another one for a person who's an entrepreneur in their country. And what they do is they refurbish machinery and equipment for small manufacturers and resells it in the secondary market. So the argument for that was, well, he's coming to the United States to help the United States circular economy, right? Keeping these machineries and different equipment out of our waterways and landfills, and giving small manufacturers an opportunity to add these important equipment to their operations and not spend an absurd amount of money trying to build up their businesses. So you got to be creative. You got to think about it in those terms. Job creation is really important, right? Investing in the U.S. economy is really important. So working with an immigration attorney is really important to kind of define that case for immigration.
Yeah, well, you folks heard it out there first. And so, very important to be able to find a qualified professional like Ingrid to be able to walk you through all the complexities of this. And so, my final, I guess, kind of question that, flows naturally from what we've talked about. So, let's say that last option that you gave us, the EB5, how would somebody go about, what steps would somebody go about? How would I do that?
Well, the way that I work, at least when a person contacts me and they're interested in an EB2 NIW, I do an initial screening. They have to fill out a questionnaire, provide some information, maybe a CV, so that I can do an initial screening. And then we have that first initial meeting to really talk about the endeavor, their background, what is this case going to look like, what types of documentation do they have. And then once they decide to hire me, we proceed to prepare the case. The person gives me all the documentation that I need. Perhaps we invest in a business plan, right, that has financial projections for the business, that explains how many employees they're going to hire, that describes how much money they've already spent, in the investment in the United States. And we prepare the entire case and we send it to immigration. I think it's also really important for people to understand that there are backlogs for these types of cases because the demand is very high and the supply of visas are very low. So it's important to be it's important to work with an immigration attorney who understands this and can give you a strategy that best sort of fits your needs, because you're going to be waiting quite some time for this visa and eventual green card to be approved.
Right. Well, I mean, that's like just like I tell my clients all the time when we're dealing with the IRS, don't measure this in days, measure it in months, right? Like to
Yeah.
get your calendar ready because this is going to take a while. So, man, Ingrid, I am so happy and appreciative to have you with us on the show, and that's excellent, great information for everybody out there. So, let's say if somebody wants to find the best immigration lawyer out there, how would they go about contacting you, Ingrid?
Go to my website, ibplaw.com. All my contact information is there. You can send me an email, call me on the phone. It's all there.
Oh my God, that's wonderful, Ingrid. Well, again, like I said, thank you so very, very much for being on the show. This has been Legal Talk. I'm your host, John Mitchell. We are on the Now Media Network, and we will be back next time with you. Thanks again, Ingrid, for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Legal Talk. I'm your host, John Mitchell, back with you again, bringing some good information that we can use. And this is another question that I've been asked. Now, we've been talking lately about the dirty dozen, right? So every year, you Google this, it comes right up. Every year, the IRS publishes a list of the top problems that they see happening, right? Any instances of fraud, any instances of things like tax evasion, problematic things that the IRS sees. And they issue this list as kind of a warning to folks out there, right? So that you can know that you know what to kind of steer clear of, right? So one of the things that happens, and it has made the Dirty Dozen list, believe you me, for several years now. And one of the things that they always have on the list lately is about micro-captive insurance companies, right? So let me just back up and tell you a little bit about insurance, all right? Just a few days ago, I wrote my monthly check to State Farm Insurance because, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there with their hand out, looking for that monthly premium payment, right? So now when I wrote that check to State Farm, they take that, they put it in their bank. Guess what? That $300 that I just paid State Farm, that is not income to them for tax purposes. So they are not going to claim that, and they're not going to claim that's not going to be income. That's not going to be taxable income to them when State Farm files their gigantic corporate tax return, right? My $300 plus the $300 for a lot of other people, right? Premiums that an insurance company gets are not income to the insurance company. So keep that in mind. That's an important point, right? Insurance companies are taxed in kind of a special way. They only pay taxes on the investment earnings, right? So insurance companies will take my $300 and hopefully I don't have an accident and they don't have to pay it out anytime soon. So they take that money and they invest it, right? And so when they invest that and make earnings off of that, that's their earnings. That's what they get taxed on, right? So keep that in mind. Now, let's say I have, I have a bunch of restaurants, right? I did some tax work for a company a couple of years back. There's a group of investors. They had 16 restaurants, right? So let's say I've got my 16 restaurants and they're in different partnerships with different people, right? So I got 16 different corporations that own each location of the restaurant chain, right? So now I'm going to say, well, I'm paying a lot of money every month for insurance, right? I got to have insurance, maybe business interruption insurance. I got to have, insurance against thefts. I got to have fire insurance. I got to have workman's comp, right? And so what if I owned the insurance company? So what a micro-captive arrangement essentially allows you to do is you own the insurance company and you actually are able to pay from your businesses. So each one of my restaurants would write a check, let's say, to the insurance company, which I own, and so they're going to take a tax deduction for that. And so I get the deductions for all of these premium payments, but then my insurance company doesn't pay taxes on that money as income. So you see where this can, this can get interesting, right? You can use this micro captive insurance company to really just accumulate a bunch of money, basically tax free, right? And if I ever shut the whole thing down and take the money out, then I got some tax consequences on that. Even that's going to be treated favorably depending on how I did things, right? So long story short, I can have a micro captive insurance company that covers losses, potential losses from my other businesses, right? That can work, like I said, the example of the restaurant chain. That can work, like if you have a bunch of rental properties, you could insure your own rental property, right, with your own insurance company. And then a lot of times what they do, the micro captive will go ahead and enter into a reinsurance contract, and so their loss is covered but at a discount, right? And so they're playing the difference between wholesale and retail, right? But now part of what they do that gets people into trouble is they're going to say, well, I'm going to pay $10,000 a month in insurance premiums, based on the risk of an alien invasion, right? What if space aliens invade Earth and my business ends up poorly affected by that, right? And so and that is not too far outside the realm of what people have tried to do. And so one of the things that the problem, the IRS looks at this carefully and they'll say, well, is that a real risk that you're trying to insure against, right? And if it's not, there's going to be maybe disallowed. Right, you're going to get your disallowed deduction. You might get some accuracy-related penalties in there. So you got to be careful with that. And so one of the things is insuring against an improbable risk, is what they call it. The other thing is, greatly inflated, right? Let's say I've got a business and State Farm is right now charging me $300 a month for my, full coverage auto insurance for my two cars, myself and my wife. Okay, so now let's say if I've got a business and I say, man, I use my cars eventually, occasionally for business. What if I were to pay my own insurance company? And guess what? I'm going to not pay $300 a month. I think, now that I'm the insurance company, I think my insurance is worth $3,000 a month. All right, and so I'm going to pay that. And I'm going to take a tax deduction on the one business, and the other business, which is my captive insurance company, I'm not going to pay taxes on that money because it's premiums, right? So, but the IRS is not going to let that fly. That's going to be a problem because now I'm not charging market rates, and it's not what they call an arm's length transaction. Right? And so that's going to, get people into trouble. And one of the arguments that also the IRS will use when they're trying to undo these transactions, they'll say that the transactions are not, they don't have a proper economic substance, right? So you got to make sure that all your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed. This takes planning, and you got to do it right and make sure that you don't run into trouble with the IRS and take deductions that you're not entitled to, and play funny business, right? So captive insurance can work, but you got to do it right. Okay, so that is, again, one of the things that the IRS warns against, dirty dozen. So be careful of that. Make sure you don't fall into that insurance trap. I am available for consultation. 713-333-0555 is my number. I'm here in Houston, Texas, but I can take tax questions from all over the United States. And my email, jmitchell@cctaxlaw.com. Thank you, everybody, for being with us on Legal Talk. We really appreciate it. Shoot me an email. Let me know you watched the show, and send your questions as well. I mean, your question might make it on the air, and I might do a segment about it. So thanks, everybody, for being with us on Legal Talk. I'm your host, John Mitchell. We're here on the Now Media Network, and we're happy to have you, and we'll be back next time with more Legal Talk. Well, hello there, everybody. everybody. Welcome back to Legal Talk. I'm your host, John Mitchell. We're here on the Now Media Network. I am so happy, overjoyed, ecstatic, in fact, to have everybody out there with us on the audience, and really, really appreciate it. And I am going to bring to the table, I hope you're hungry, because I've got a table set for you. I got some really great information that we're going to talk about today. And, I usually try and go out and ask people around me what kind of tax questions do they have. I can come in here, I can talk about it on the show, and, bring everybody some good knowledge that people can use, the stuff that's going to be important to know about taxes. That's my specialty. Hopefully later on I'll be able to talk about a few other legal issues, because I can do that also. But, my specialty is taxes. So if you out there have tax questions, you can also send those to me at jmitchell@cctaxlaw.com. And, if it's a question that's important enough, it rises to the level, not some, niche thing, I'll try to answer you individually if that's the case. But if not, if it's a kind of a wide-ranging topic that everybody can get something out of, I love to hear from folks out there in the audience, and I love to get questions, and I will talk about those questions as they come up here on the big show. So one of the things that has come up and it does come up, pretty frequently, let's say, despite my best efforts, I filed my tax return and then I figured out, oh my God, I made a mistake. Right? My tax returns, I got the numbers. I've seen everything happen from, they transposed numbers and it was supposed to be 619 and they put 691. So sometimes there's, mistakes like that happen. Sometimes, oh my God, a big one is, I forgot, right? So I filed my tax return and then later, after the fact, I get another, 1099 INT, I got some bank interest, I got some dividends, whatever it is. Oh my God, I forgot to include that income, right? So anytime that you have already filed your tax return and then you figure out, oh my goodness, there's a mistake that happened. I made a mistake on my return. I jokingly say, what if you accidentally put your dog, your cat, as a dependent? Don't do that. Can't do that. But let's say you did so and you did it innocently enough. You didn't know. Like, oh my God, I'm a pet parent. That's people say, right? I'm a pet parent. Pets are like my kids. I'm going to put them on a tax return. They cost me a lot of money. I have to buy kibble. I got to take them to the vet. Why do I not get to take them as a dependent, right? They're my companion. I need these animals, right? All that's true, and God bless you, but IRS doesn't see it that way. You cannot claim your pets as dependents on the tax return. But let's say you did, and then somebody told you, you did that, you filed your tax return, and then you came to see John Mitchell, and John told you, oh my God, you shouldn't have done that. You're going to get in big trouble. IRS is going to be after you. So now what do, right? So you can file, if you're an individual, you filed a tax return, a Form 1040, right? Everybody's familiar with the 1040, the 1040, right? But a lot of people don't know there is an amended tax return form called a 1040X. Letter X, right? So 1040X, no, it has nothing to do with Elon Musk or, formerly Twitter, whatever it is. No, 1040X has been around for many years, long, decades and decades. That's what they've called it. So that's your form for making a correction. Oops, IRS, sorry, I made a mistake. Let me go ahead and file a corrected tax return. And if you file that corrected tax return, normally, the IRS will accept that. Now, funny enough, a lot of people don't know this. The IRS is not obligated to allow you to file an amended, corrected tax return. Once you've filed your return and the filing deadline is passed, well, they have discretion to say, no, we're not gonna let you file an amended return. Very rarely do you ever see that. I've seen it, a couple of times. I've been doing this for a good long 30 or so years now. And I've seen a couple of times where the IRS has pushed back and said, no, we're not going to allow an amended tax return. But one of the things you want to do, very important, is if you need to make a change and you need to correct your tax return, one of the big recommendations I always have for people is do it as soon as you possibly can. The minute, the day, the week that you figured out that something was wrong, go ahead and file that. And here's the reason why. Let's say you filed your tax return on January 30th. And then, February rolls around, you get another form. Oh my God, I forgot to include this. Let me make a corrected, amended tax return, right? If you do that before the filing deadline, so let's say you filed your tax return January 30th, but you had up until April 15th to file that. So if you file a 1040X before April 15th, this is getting a little bit technical. Follow along with me because you're going to like this. It's going to be important. So if you filed your correction to your tax return, your amended return, 1040X, if you file that before April 15th, that's technically not called an amended tax return. Yeah, I know, even though that's what it says on the form, right? Right across the top. But IRS, when they process it, it's not considered an amended tax return. It's going to be called what they call a superseding tax return, which what that does is that just knocks out the previous return, and now this counts as your original tax return as long as it's before your filing deadline. Right? So you filed on January the 20th, and oh my God, come around middle of February, oh geez, I forgot, I need to correct something, I need to make a change. Do that, and as long as it's before April 15th, you have now filed what they call a superseding tax return, and you don't need to do anything else. Fill it out, send it in, and that's the difference. There is the IRS has to accept that. Whereas if it's actually a real honest to God amended tax return, they have a little bit of discretion there. They can say, no, we're not going to make the change for you, right? And now the IRS prefers that you not, make any additional amended or corrected or superseding filings at all. They'd rather you didn't because it's just double work for them, right? But also the other thing is if they, if you filed a tax return and you figure out there's a mistake on it, well, a lot of people will argue it's incumbent upon you because you're going to file, comply with your legal obligations. You're going to file as best you can, right? And if you discover there was a mistake, my advice to you is go ahead and make that correction, even if it's a couple of years later. One of the things to keep in mind, let's say you had a tax return and you, for whatever reason, life happens, right? And you owed a bunch of money on your tax return, right? So let's say 5 years goes by and you figure out, oh my God, I made a mistake. It turns out I filed incorrectly. I made a mistake. I don't owe $100,000. It's only $10,000. I moved the decimal point, right? I made a mistake. Well, if the IRS is still collecting on that, you can file an amended tax return. And what that does is they call it an abatement, right? So an abatement is to adjust the amount of money that you owe, make it a downward adjustment. So if you owed, you purported to owe $100,000, and then you file an amended return. Oh my God, I've caught my mistake. It was not supposed to be 100. It was supposed to be 10. File it now, and there's no deadline on that. So you can always abate a tax due, right? Now, here's the tricky part also. Let's say more than 3 years has gone by and you got a refund. Well, you can do your amended tax return. They might accept it and they'll send you a letter saying it's accepted. But then what happens? More than 3 years have gone by. You're outside of what they call the refund, the RSED, the refund statute end date, right? So you are 3 years has gone by. You're not going to get a refund anymore, right? And the rules go a little bit deeper than that. But I'm not trying to bury everybody in a bunch of rules today. Just to say this, right? In general, if you owe money and it's more than 3 years has gone by and you discover a legitimate mistake, you can file that amended return, make your corrections, and reduce the amount of money that you're going to end up paying the IRS. And by the way, what a lot of people don't realize, if you said that you owed 100,000 and oops, it turns out you only owed 10, and you didn't pay that 100,000, and they've sent you letters and they've started charging you a bunch of interest and penalties. When you get them to reduce the original debt from 100 down to the 10, that's also going to make a proportional reduction in your interest and penalties. So those are going to go down automatically. So it's important, if you find out that you made a mistake and you filed your tax return and oops, I put down that I owed more money than I really did. Well, if it's enough money to make it worth it, man, I'm going to mess around with $100 or whatever, right? But if it's enough money to make it worth it to you, then go ahead and file your amended return, your 1040X. You're going to get a letter back from the IRS. Takes them several weeks, takes like 12 weeks or so for them to process under normal circumstances. And it can be a lot longer than that, but usually it's 12 weeks is their turnaround time to process an amended tax return. So if you originally owed too much money and you've discovered a mistake, go ahead, file the amended return, and they're going to send you a letter and say, okay, your account has been adjusted. You don't owe us 100,000, you owe us 10,000, right? So you can do that, or it might be if you got a refund you were expecting. If you were expecting a refund, oh hey, instead of owing 10,000, I was supposed to get $1,000 back. But more than 3 years have passed. Well, they're going to send you a letter and say, hey, we corrected your account, but you're outside of the time limit to claim that money. 3 years was your deadline. You're past the 3 years. So sorry. We made the corrections in the computer, but so sorry, no money for you. Bye-bye. Have a nice day. Better luck next time, right? That's basically what the IRS is going to tell you. So, you can always try and make an amended return, make your corrections. Again, if it's past the filing deadline, that's an amended return. If not, it's a superseding. Difference being, IRS has to accept the superseding. They don't necessarily have to accept the amended, although they usually do. And that's the refund deadlines. So if you make an amended return and you're supposed to get a refund and it's past the deadline, so sorry, no money for you. But if you owe money, then you can get the IRS to go ahead and make a correction, and you don't owe that money. And also, final point, just to reiterate, if you correct the original tax amount, that automatically corrects the interest and it automatically corrects the penalties. Okay, so again, I am your host of the Legal Talk Show, John Mitchell. I am an expert in taxes, all things tax. Been in this game for 30 years. So if you guys out there have tax questions, you can find me at my Houston, Texas location extraordinaire, 713-333-0555. We're in the beautiful Greenway Plaza area of Houston, Texas, but not to worry. I am able to represent people all across the United States, and I have people all across the United States, and I even have clients in other countries that have U.S. tax situations going on. So I'm able to help you, no problem at all, right? Or you can always send me an email, again, jmitchell@cctaxlaw.com. Love to hear from people out there. If you have a tax problem that you want me to represent you and solve, then you can contact me about that. Or if you just want to contact me and say, hey, saw you on the show, you're looking mighty handsome there. You can do that. Or you have a tax question, try and get it on the show for you. So again, this has been Legal Talk. I am your host, John Mitchell. Thank you, everybody, for being out there in the audience and checking us out. And we will be back next time on Legal Talk with more good, excellent, actionable information for you. Thanks so much.
This has been a Now Media Networks feature presentation.